Hi everyone, this is Sky. I hope that you're doing okay during this time. I wanted to come on and really offer some peaceful, tranquil space and reflection for us all today. That's sort of my goal for this video and this recording is just kind of a tranquil space away from everything that's happening. I'm not going to talk specifically about, what we're going through societally right now. I have videos on that if you want to jump over to my channel and look for them. They are there. But I wanted to talk specifically, or sort of mold this tranquil space around the theme of like coping with the unexpected, dealing with unexpected events in life, working with, things that go wrong without, having been predictable, themes of rigidity, themes of investing too much in predictability, control dynamics, and ultimately releasing some of those things so that we can cope much easier with what we are dealing with right now. So over the last week, I've had a lot of signs and symbols come into my life that deal with unexpected events and how I cope with those things. And it's led me to think a lot about how a lot of people cope with unexpected things, which usually is not in a great way. Our coping mechanisms are where we find addiction. It's where we find our addictive tendencies, our control dynamics, all of these things that we deal with in our emotional lives. And when something unexpected happens or when something difficult overcomes you, it's really easy to get discouraged and to, fall into old addictions or to fall into old addictive ways of thinking even. And I think that this time, more than any other that I've felt, is really asking us to make friends with the unexpected, okay? And to not be destroyed by the unexpected. Because perhaps there are a select few people where, an unexpected thing is really difficult. It can be an unexpected illness or an unexpected, trip to the hospital. Like, that is definitely a case where unexpected is difficult. But for some of us, it's not that bad. For some of us, it's much more mundane. And it's like unexpectedly having to go to the house in the mountains or unexpectedly, not being able to go to that party or that vacation that we had booked for a long time. And if we're in those cases and we're feeling, and anything like that, that isn't like a life or death matter, there are some things that I think that we have to get real with ourselves about at this time, and I think that we have to go easier on ourselves. What I've seen as one of the most common coping mechanisms for these unexpected events that we're facing is just anger. I'm upset, and perhaps also binging too. And this is food, alcohol, emotional experiences. I've seen anger and I've seen binging. These are the two most common emotional reactions that I've seen to what we're going through, and perhaps a mixture. And less commonly, I've also seen, apathy. What else have I seen? I've seen denial, things like that. Those are also pretty common, but specifically anger and binging. So anger and binging are a similar energy, because anger, they're antonyms actually. When you're talking about the energetic action of them, anger is where we are, pulled or pushed to express those feelings within and get them out, in a very dramatic way. And then binging is where we're, pulled to consume a lot. It's a vicious cycle with anger and binging. And the thing is, if we're feeling in this time of isolation, if we're feeling unwell, angry, hungry, while we still have plenty of food, if we have all these cravings, or cravings for emotional experiences, cravings for food even though we have enough, or fear, it's like none of these things are new. And that's an interesting thing that I've been looking at all around me lately, because yes, there are some people who are having a really bad time, and I'll talk a little bit about that later maybe, but I want to firstly talk about the people who are, it's tough but your needs are met. This is just such a absolutely wonderful time to work on your own emotional sense of well-being, because you might see that just with the smallest disruption, of your expected reality, that there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of binging, there's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of upset. Not everyone, but some people. So if you are feeling there, if you're feeling like you're there and you're feeling like angry, or you're wanting to like consume a lot, or you're wanting to lash out, maybe if you live alone, you might have been having like tantrums, or like throwing things around, or being really loud, or being like really combative or something with yourself. That's not new, okay? I think a lot of us feel like a lot of this is new, or we feel like, wow, because of the isolation, I'm now very upset about things, or because of, not being able to have all of these expected, fun social events or whatever, like I now feel deprived. Those things were there before, okay? That anger was there before. That sense of deprivation was there before, but it was masked over by external events that are truly meaningless in the long run. And what I want you to really sit with today, that I'm really sitting with right now, is how great of an opportunity could this be to actually work on those things? This inner sense of deprivation, this assuredness I've gained that I can or can't do something. That I have to live in the city, or that I have to live in the country, or whatever it is, that I rigidly can only live in this one type of environment, or this one type of lifestyle, or this one type of status. That's all that I can do, and otherwise, like, I'm going to risk a lot just to maintain that. So what is really interesting is this like really empowered Capricorn year that we're having is teaching us a lot about flexibility through themes of rigidity. Okay, I talked a little bit in my last video about some of the Taoist themes of rigidity, and that was interesting. And I had a lot of people who commented about that, and they mentioned some of the principles like Wu Wei and a few others, which I am not a Taoist expert in any way, nor am I a practitioner. But I have actually been really comforted by some of the Taoist principles during this time, especially ones relating to like embracing the inevitable, not beating yourself up because you don't have control. Things like that have been really helpful for me, and I would definitely recommend you do some of your own research, because that it's almost like that won't betray you right now. Every one of us during this time are going to really see so clearly how we're not flexible, how we're not settling, how we're demanding that certain things be a certain way. And you see, that's kind of been a sort of an influenced way of life. Like, yeah, you can't settle for not making this amount of money, or you got to push harder, you got to, dictate exactly what your life is going to look like 5 years from now and work every day to make that a reality. And perhaps in some paradigms, for some people, that's not so bad. But I really think that mentality also makes a time like this really, really difficult and really emotionally trying, and perhaps a lot more disturbing for somebody than a type of person who was a bit less worldly, or a bit less, rigidly adhering to having to see that they controlled their lives, And of course, we all need autonomy, and we all need to be able to control our own lives. That's not what I'm saying. But sometimes things are out of our hands, and sometimes there's a formula that the universe uses that is much bigger than us. You see, humans, I think, have gotten a little bit big for their boots. And I talked about this in Saturn and Aquarius video. I'll link it below and in the top right-hand corner. It's hard for the individual to really shine during this time, and it's hard for one individual person to really completely dictate their lives and the lives of people around them, because there's like a clash of egos. We can all strive, and we can all achieve, and we can all have freedom and autonomy over our own lives, but through that, we also have to give it to everybody else, and it's really hard to accomplish really big things without like a lot of people involved. So that's why I think just the nature of like economy and big corporation and big business is struggling so much and being such a controversial issue right now, is because on one hand, we have like the empowered individual in this current paradigm, but on the other hand, we have like this theme of like teamwork and everybody working for like one big thing that like compromises the individual and creates a collective. And that this is like ultimately, again, the duality of the current paradigm, which I've been talking about, but it clashes. And that's why something like this becomes so chaotic and so big, so widespread, is just because things are clashing, okay? Things are not harmonious right now. Things were not harmonious for quite a long time. I mean, we're talking like maybe a century or two. Not quite that. It's something like 120 years that this clash has really been building in it. And there's like a catalyst, and then there's a collapse. And it may not completely collapse even with what we're going through right now. But it will be tested and it will be reformed. And it's basically a reformative time with the Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn connections that we're having in astrology. There's always a reformation with that connection of energies in Capricorn. 500 years ago, it was the Protestant Reformation in England and Europe, and we haven't had that same exact connection since then. And now there's going to be a huge Reformation again. And what that looks like, guys, and everyone who's listening to this, everyone who's on my channel, who's subscribed for a while, us spiritual warrior people, we can't let ourselves lose control of ourselves, okay? Because otherwise we can kind of become cannon fodder for like a reformation that we don't really believe in. And I'm not even talking politically or from like a theme of like government or, collective movements. It's going to come through those things, but it has more to do with how individuals align with each other. And that is a collective, but it's like, it's kind of neither here nor there, whether it's channeling out through all of these rigid themes of like politics or media or, art, culture, whatever. It'll come out through all of those things, but it's going to deal with how we are choosing to relate with the people in our lives. And that's where it starts. That's where these things thrive with a life of their own. Once we kind of let our own anger or our own rage take a precedence to what we know to be true or right. So to rein this all back into a little bit more of the mundane and dealing with the now, we have to be a little bit detached, and we have to forge health within ourselves, because despite the individual feeling disempowered right now, that is an opportunity for the individual to become stronger and to become more healthy and to become more clear on who they are, what they represent. And I will be real honest with you guys. It's like now being isolated, looking at ourselves in the mirror so much, not being distracted by all of these events or all of the alcohol or all of the coffee or whatever it is that totally change up our inner nervous system. We are realizing, okay, we are seeing and realizing who and what we actually are. So it's interesting that maybe there became too much focus on the collective. We have Saturn moving into Aquarius. It's going to go retrograde back into Capricorn. So something about the new collective ideals that are coming from this and shaping up with this are not going to be satisfactory, and it's going to be pulled back to a more individual focus for pretty much the rest of this year until like December of this year, by the time we get into the summer. So complicated timeline, I know. But basically, to think more about the timeline that we're dealing with, from now until about mid-May, which mid-May is when I predict that, things will start to go somewhat back to normal. Not completely, but there will be a little bit of respite, and, that's another video. But mid-May, things are going to start to feel more individually focused. So we really want to use this time of the entire month of April to maybe face something that we really convinced ourselves was hard or difficult or impossible or, unchangeable about ourselves. Saturn in Aquarius, it's about a solidified, cemented transmutation or alchemizing of your own nature, your own persona. Maybe embracing some of those changes that we know needed to happen. So I've just as a hypothetical, I've always had these assets or this land, and I've never been able to face it, or I've never been able to work with it. Now you might actually be able to face it and work with it and see that it was never that hard to begin with. And through that, that's a level up. And again, it's a hypothetical. I feel that a lot of people, it's unfaced things that with the previous prosperity became more difficult in the mind than they actually were. And now it's small in comparison to the difficulties that we're all facing. And through that, it gets solved, and through that, it gets to be no longer a problem. Again, the duality, so many healing possibilities, so many previous crisis mentalities that just no longer are that. Okay, so I'm going to move on a little bit. I know that one got a little bit complicated, but here we are. What I want to talk about next is unfinished stories. Okay, this has been a theme that's been coming up. We had the double one energy that we went into, a complete restart, seeing life like we haven't seen it ever before, maybe. And nonetheless, there are these unfinished stories that come up. We maybe see our ex's profile is like a friend suggestion, or we have them reach out to us, or we have like suddenly a new feeling about an old job or an old experience that we had. It's really interesting. What we have also in the transits is we have Mercury moving up past Neptune and Pisces, preparing to go into Aries, and then moving towards Chiron. And it's like Mercury takes a message from Neptune and Pisces and then like is going to bring it up to Chiron and Aries. And within that cusp, the Pisces Aries cusp is is like the secret to life. It's like kind of like a Pandora's box type of energy. So there's going to be like big things coming to light. I will say that for some people, like huge aha moments. And some people will feel a little bit driven over the edge by that. And that's why we have to really get like a bit gritty here in a way. And we have to get strong. We have to get like no longer afraid of certain things, or no longer held back by certain like imaginary difficulties. And what I feel is that the messages that come through between now and about June really are going to be like everything you need, okay? Some stories might get finished up. You might re-meet with somebody, even if it's just like over the phone or something, and you might like just say, what, closure's here, that's it, that's that. Give yourself closure during this time. We needed to do that in Pisces season, okay? We needed to do that in March. But not for everyone did that happen, and there are some unfinished stories now here in April that have to be like really directly dealt with. Aries season is not about beating around the bush or thinking, oh, I might reach out to them, or I maybe in the future, or I might like, talk to their friends and kind of test the waters. No, you got to be direct with people right now, if anything. It's either direct towards or direct away. No in-betweens. And I think that that's one of the most healing things for this time, is to really understand that direct action is the best thing. Sometimes we just have to get involved in something and start dealing with things and start empowering ourselves, just to see that it never had to be as difficult as we thought that it was. Also, with unfinished stories, it's like it's an important reminder that we write our own narratives in our lives, and I think that this is an important thing to think about too. Like, on one hand, we can't control other people, but we are in charge of what story we give ourselves about that. Like, so say, for example, you were like cheated on a long time ago in a previous relationship, and like you broke up, you moved on, but you still can't get that person out of your head. Like, maybe you still think fondly of them, or maybe you still like want that in some way, and that's like a toxic narrative for yourself, okay? That's like a problem. I'm kind of there, guys. I understand how you feel. Now is a time of rewriting that narrative, and now is a time to accept where things have come and to really step into that power, because we really clip our own wings and disempower ourselves when we think fondly of betrayal. It really kind of clouds our vision about things. And it doesn't mean that you need to get vengeful, or that you need to start thinking, oh wow, yeah, I should just hate that person, or I need to like get back at them or something. That's really bad right now too. People with like revenge on their hearts, wanting retribution, wanting to like, be the thorn in other people's side. Those people are coming to a nasty experience during this time astrologically. Like Saturn in Aquarius is like it's almost biblical, okay? It's all, and not just Saturn and Aquarius, but like just the totality of what we're dealing with in the sky right now is almost like biblical. It's almost kind of like Revelations, So people who get really invested or divested from things, okay, this is a crazy channeled insight that I love. It's very empowering. People who get super invested or super divested of things are kind of like burning away. And it's the people who can kind of like flexibly work through these problems that will really thrive. And people who have kindness in their hearts. You would be surprised about what like kindness, not rejecting, not pushing people away. We've got Neptune in I'm just looking at the chart of the skies right now. We've got Neptune in a very interesting place, okay? And what it does is it does erode a lot of boundaries. It erodes a lot of borders, erodes a lot of boundaries, That's not always a good thing, but it is what it is. And the people who are being really rigid about things are just going to get washed away. And it's like you can either get washed away, or you can like swim, like take the wave, And I would recommend taking the wave as much as you can. during this time. I feel that Pisces season has bled over a little bit. And even though it is Aries season, we've got Mercury in Pisces. Until Mercury gets into Aries, we're going to still feel some of these connections to the past. We're going to, still sort of be in that waking phase. Like, for example, when you've been sleep deprived and you have that great, 12 hours sleep that you haven't had in months. And you don't have to wake up, you don't have an alarm set, and you just naturally start to wake up, and you kind of stay in that waking stage for maybe an hour. I hope that a lot of you are getting to do that now with these quarantines, a great time to have that. That's kind of where we're at collectively until Mercury gets into Aries. Then we're going to be up and going for things, And sometimes the most healing happens there in those stages, in those waking stages of not quite being in REM sleep, but not being awake either. That's a great blessing. And I think that you have to kind of imagine what it's like to be in that place and then trying to do very decisive things, or trying to solve problems or reject or accept while you're in a sleeping phase. That's the thing about Neptune and Pisces collectively over this last decade is, it's there's not really a lot of wakefulness in anything. Nothing's true, strictly adhered to. And then some things are it's really hard to identify things. So identity crisis, it's everywhere. Everybody has that. And it won't really be until Neptune and Aries, which is still a few years off, that we really fix the identity crisis. That's Neptune and Aries is a collective time of really identifying, but there's nothing to really identify with right now, and I think that that's an important thing to accept. And it's unlikely, okay, that there's that much security or stability here, right? Maybe when Saturn goes retrograde back into Capricorn, it will kind of bring back a semblance of security and stability, but Saturn's in Aquarius, we've got an grand air trine this month. Things are airing out, basically. If you've seen the French Quarter in New Orleans, canals of Venice, things, they're airing out, Likewise, we have to do that too. And sometimes when we're very strictly identifying with things, rigidly creating something that has to be a certain way, there's no time for it to air out, and it feels very contrived, okay? So things that are too rigidly elected or too rigidly strived for are contrived. And you can smell it from a mile away. If things are if there's too much production, if there's too much or too little even, if it's extreme either way, it's you can smell it a mile away, for it is what it is. And we have good instincts right now, despite it all. But those instincts are going to probably have us going from place to place, or, whether that's physical houses, or, political affiliations, or, collective factioning, whatever it is, we're going to be jumping around a lot. So I just wanted to kind of prepare you guys for that. And that's going to really connect to that theme of unfinished stories. And to kind of bring that back home, it's was it their fault? Was it my fault? Was their cheating ever warranted? No, yes, no, yes. There's a lot of jumping back and forth, and we really have to give ourselves a narrative that is flexible, but also not beating a dead horse, we gotta let things that have passed pass, So for the fixed signs, the Scorpios, the Taurus, the Aquarius, the Leos, it's it can be a bit of a tough time where we have to face something that maybe we didn't think that we could, but it's that teaches you to be so much more stronger and resolute and resolved and all of that. So one more topic that I want to touch on in this video of, collective messages and rambling. I hope you guys don't mind it. I am moving fast today because I had a lot of changes suddenly come up in my own life, having to be flexible. I won't have a lot of time to edit this very fancily. It's going to be pretty, pretty quickly assembled, but quality nonetheless. The last topic I want to talk about, and this is a channeled message that just came to me, is just 3 words: a beautiful life. Okay, I've been hearing this a lot. I've been connecting to this theme a lot. What does it take to have a beautiful life? How beautiful is your life now? And what are your standards? Okay, boundaries, standards, narratives that we're writing. Okay, these 3 things are needing an overhaul. We're talking complete overhaul, guys. Saturn in Aquarius, full month of April, complete overhaul of standards, boundaries, resolve, things like that. You got to get real with people sometimes. You got to sometimes put your foot down in a kind and loving way. What do I mean by this? It's our lives struggle to be beautiful when others are trying to control us. Okay. When we have, all of these fixtures in our lives, these people, these assets, these things, they make our lives less beautiful when we are beholden to them in unfair ways. So yeah, sometimes we have to say, you know what, I'm not your employee if it's like a family member. Or sometimes we have to say, I am not your dog, in a very toxic relationship or in a toxic family relationships. I am a person, I am not like, there's a bit of confusion there. Like egos get really out of control sometimes. And then Saturn in Aquarius, and it'll retrograde back into Capricorn as we talk about, it humbles people. So we have to kind of look at the theme of like a beautiful life. And we have to think about that from a humble place that isn't afraid to establish boundaries. That's as best as I can lingually look at this. Because a beautiful life is here, and that's an interesting thing. There's nothing particularly ugly about people who are not hospitalized right now, or people who are not, on a completely like martial quarantine or something. There's a lot of ugly in the world, but for a lot of us, there's also a lot of beauty. And regardless of which place we're in, we see like sudden amalgamations of both ends. It's a very yin-yang dualistic paradigm that we're in. And within that, there's just an unarguable truth. What do I have? What do I own? What contracts have I been honoring for a long time? There's regret here, guys. I'm not going to lie. There's regret here too. There's like, wow, I should have left a long time ago, but now I can't. There's, wow, I should have taken that job at that time, but now I can't. That's there. And here we are coping with unexpected events. Solving unfinished stories, giving ourselves a narrative that is more kind to us, establishing a beautiful life, and accepting unarguable truths that will empower us at the end of the day if we can be humble and integrity-based within our own stories that we're crafting here. So anyway, everyone, I think that I'm going to call this a wrap for this week's premiere. Thank you so much for being here. I'm doing these premieres every Friday at, I believe it's 6 p.m. Pacific time. Yes, every Friday we're having them here. Every Saturday I have exclusive tea chats on Patreon. So we talk about other viewer requested topics and different things over there. Those are great. They've just been, everyone loves them. So jump over to my Patreon page. I'll have that linked below as well as in the center of the screen in the last bit of this video. I also have an ebook called Moon Symbols, which is a great way to support the channel and also initiate some emotional healing. If you wanted to get to know your moon sign better or the phase of your moon, that will be linked below as well. And I want you guys to stay safe during this time. And I want you to allow some of this healing and try to see, if we're feeling like really upset or really worried or really condemned by the things coming in right now. Why, Do we not like ourselves that much? We've got to get more favorable over who we are and what we represent, because there are people dealing with real problems. And I feel like I might have kind of spoken to a specific type of person right now who's like not maybe in the worst position, but also not in the best position. It's sort of that purgatorial place. So that's been this week's video, but I will talk perhaps on next week's video about people who are on other sides of that. And, I can even touch on that briefly here. And that's just going to be like, time passes, it'll be over before you know it. There's a degree of that. Like, I feel that people who are really in like tough circumstances right now, like it's over before you know it to a degree. And, the nature of trauma or the nature of difficulty is that it inspires you to know what's right. So yeah, if we're super ill, super discouraged, dealing with abusive, people that we live with, even being stuck with those types of people, that's a major thing. This is what shows us the choices that we've made, okay? And this is also what shows us like, wow, I was not allowing myself to be very healthy, or other people never allowed me to be very healthy. And from that moment on, once things go back to normal, there's a lot more ability to make changes. But I just want you to look at it as an opportunity. I want you to look at these things as an opportunity, and I want you to find tranquil space and healing meditative space in what we're going through now. So anyway, everyone, thank you so much for being here. If you have any questions, feel free to comment them below. And I'm wishing everyone like love and light, and I hope that we're all doing well. Keep me in your prayers as well. I've had a bit of a shakeup with this, with just everyone's there, I know, but thank you so much for your thoughts as well. And hit the like button on this video if you enjoyed it, and follow me on Patreon if you have that opportunity. And we'll be talking soon, everyone. Much love. Bye.